Welcome to the Aegance Offscript Podcast, where we talk to industry leaders who share their stories, insights, and lessons, unfiltered and unscripted. I'm your host, Lawrence, and today I'm joined by Mike Steyn, the owner and operations director at Aspire Solutions. Now, Aspire Solutions have built their reputation on delivering custom solutions that put usability and client value front and center, whilst also investing heavily in people, from learnerships to developer growth. Mike, welcome. Really great to have you on.
Lawrence, thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me on now.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Could you, for the sake of the viewers and the listeners, give us a little bit more context around what it is that you do at Aspire Solutions? What are your areas of operations, etc.?
Yes, so Aspire Solutions is a 22-year-old veteran IT company, and it's been through many iterations in those 22 years growing up, and we always use the analogy of it almost tracking a kid growing up and, every stage of life through infancy to teenagerdom to maturity and I guess at some point old age, I guess. I have been with Aspire and owned Aspire from the get-go 22 years ago, and in the journey have primarily been involved with ensuring that the things that we do deliver from an operations perspective, I'm the tip of the iceberg. I want to make sure that every solution we build goes out the door correctly, and that at the end of the day, we are that our staff are operating in a good manner and all the stuff's going through the door. So I am the operations director by title, but I'm deeply involved with all the solutions that we do and in trying and get them out for our clients in terms of their requirements.
And when you zoom out on Aspire's purpose, what does building tech that builds a nation practically mean for what you prioritize on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's very close to our heart, Lawrence, and it speaks to the actual clients that we've got and the systems that we build. So we are, to a large degree, in the public sector space. We do have a few large private clients as well, but mostly in the public sector space. And we deal with all sorts of processes that local government, local municipalities or metropolitan municipalities need to face on a day-to-day basis. And that basically relates back to the citizen, because these services or items that local government and municipalities are trying to do impact on a citizen somewhere, whether it's public transport, whether it's road building or whatever the subject matter is. There's always a citizen at the end of this, and it might be a businessman, might be an ordinary citizen, might be somebody. And we very much are involved with projects that are trying to improve things for those citizens at the end of the day. And ultimately, I always relate it back to 90% of the time we can measure that by, are we saving someone time? Because time is, as you know, a very precious commodity in this modern age, and so much happening. So instead of a citizen having to come into a municipal office, instead of a citizen having to kind of spend a lot of time on documents and stuff like that, we try and ensure that is improved, and thus is part, and at the same time look after the tax dollar, because that's the other thing, is that all of these initiatives have monetary issues behind them. Government spends money on certain things, local government and municipalities and national government spends money on all sorts of things, and large sums of money. And if you don't have proper systems in place to track that and look after it, that also falls on the wayside. So from a nation building perspective, we're right in there, the trenches, trying to ensure that these processes are improved. And we work with people on the ground that really want to make a difference. I know there's a lot of politics high up, and there's a lot of talk about what happens at a real high level, and it's the bit that gets out into the news. But the arena and the world that we move in is officials trying to implement practical things properly. And as citizens, we kind of sometimes lose sight of the fact that, to a large degree, and it depends on where you are in the country, your garbage gets removed, you've got water coming through your taps, and all those things that go with it. So, and to get that to people that don't have it. So from a nation building perspective, we're right in there in the trenches.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that there are any trade-offs that you need to make between short-term delivery versus long-term capability? I mean, do your values show up in those tough decisions?
They definitely do, and yes, the answer is absolutely. And the thing is that we operate in an environment which is bureaucratic. That continuity is difficult. Officials come and go. Initiatives can stall. The appointment to be able to work on something sometimes, and things get shipped from one company or one consultancy to another consultancy, and those solutions then go halfway and then break down. So we work within that very difficult environment that says that at the one hand, our clients desperately want us to help them and want us to be agile and want us to be able to put in solutions in a good manner. But at the same time, they work in a very strict, rigid, bureaucratic framework. And it's needed because at the end of the day, that's also part of to protect the citizen in terms of audit and ensuring that things are properly put out and also things that go with it. But it creates almost a push-pull, because you're trying to, in this modern age, with all of the technological changes that are happening so fast, as you know, and things that you guys are involved with, you're trying to deliver this dynamic service, and you're working within a bureaucratic structure. And even the officials sometimes throw their arms up and give up, and that's the thing that we have to push through and push through, sometimes with barriers that says you're stuck for 3 months. But I think at the end of the day, and you've asked about values, that if your ethos is driving that this thing that we're doing may not, shall not, will not end up on a shelf somewhere and add no value to somebody, be it the taxpayer or the government or the public citizens, you'll find a way to move that forward. Sometimes you'll get stuck, and sometimes even we throw up our arms and say the bureaucracy is killing us and we can't, nobody's moving and no decisions are being made. And we've had things stall, but at the same time, we push through them and we push. And that's the thing, is if you keep that value that this thing has to get out as quickly as possible to get a return on investment for the citizen, then you manage to overcome these obstacles.
And I think, as you've mentioned a few times, if you hold the citizen as and the impact you will have on that citizen's life as your sort of driving factor, it's probably motivation enough, isn't it?
It is. And at the same time, the partnership with the people on the ground in the organizations that we work for that are trying to make a difference. It's actually that they help you keep that energy up. We have seen some of them kind of almost give up, and as I say, throw their arms up and say, I can't beat this bureaucratic machine. But at the same time, and especially with the younger guys, and the younger guys that come from all sorts of walks of life, across South Africa, and they have an enthusiasm to try and do the right thing. And they sometimes, the older guys are a bit jaded by the bureaucracy, and they've been there. So if you hold the citizens' outcome in mind and try and assist these guys that are trying to make a difference, because at the end of the day, what we do is we're not the guys that provide the water in the pipes. We're the guys that help build solutions that can assist the people that are trying to do that at the end of the day. So I think if you keep those two aspects in mind, then you'll always drive in the right direction.
And how would you define success for Aspire over the next 24 months in a market that's leaning into AI and stronger data practices?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting question. I think the key thing for us is as things evolve and as things kind of accelerate and AI stuff changes, is that we are still on the ground seeing the nasty and ugly. Okay. And by that, I mean, if you don't have the right foundations, and I'm talking about systems, and I'm talking about data, and I'm talking about processes and the way that they inform each other, if you don't have the fundamentals right on that, you can forget about getting any value out of anything else above that, and you can have the most incredible machine learning kind of things happening, but if your foundations are not right, if your systems foundations are not right, and goes with data, then you're going to really battle. And what happens is, and this is a challenge, because at a political level and a high executive level, the promise of these AI things is being punted absolutely every day, as you know, it's in the news all the time. And the message coming down is, we need this stuff, we want this stuff. Smart cities, do this. This thing must just automate this, and it must, optimize this. But what we see is the guys on the ground that are still trying to make sure that the foundations are in place for these things to happen. And in a way, it's a bottom-up meets top-down implementation of really smart technology. We see bad system implementation, which means bad data. And if it's bad data, it doesn't matter how sophisticated the AI agents and things on top of it, it's going to just give you bad outcomes. We see bad systems not implemented properly, and that cost a lot of money, and that are being undermined through manual processes because the never proper adoption of them, which actually means that things are going backwards. In other words, things are being done literally in spreadsheets or through other manual means. So while and again, I guess it is to a degree the organizations we work for. You also hear about big PTY limiteds that are at the forefront of technology, that have adopted technology as a driver, and I mean, you probably know a few of them. But we've also seen this in PTY limiteds, big PTY limiteds, where it's their foundations, and it's often when there's been mergers and kind of all sorts of stuff, and technology bases have been tried to hammer together, that they're not ready to be able to harness the best out of these new technologies because the foundations are still creaky. So if I look for the next 24 months, and in particular some of the clients that we're working with, we're taking things that are 15-year-old legacy stuff, and we're having to improve those foundations again because they were neglected effectively. And what is amazing is to see, and particularly in one sphere, and I can tell you about it, is how we've gone from when we started with them, and we're not the only guys working for them, there's other guys, so that speaks to collaboration as well, because at the end of the day, we can't solve everything in an organization. But if there's a collaborative approach between all the people that are trying to do technology interventions for them, it's been remarkable to see how when we first started, there was a real disconnect between who was doing what. There was a real, a mess in terms of understanding where data flows are, where master data is, all these kind of things that go with it. And through perseverance and head down stuff, a year and a half later, there's real clarity of where we are and a massive improvement in where we are. And the road for the next 12 months, 24 months is clear. And I keep saying to the guys that we're working for, you hang on for another 24 months and you're going to see this machine, and by that I mean a broad machine, absolutely humming. And then you can go, the sky's the limit stuff in terms of what you can do with that technology. But that's the reality that we face. And often it's a case of legacy things, in other words, implementations that are old, or some of them are shut down. And it's a challenge because you've got to redesign these things as the guys are still using them. And the analogy we always use is that we basically redesign and build a new airplane while you're still flying the old one. So it's a challenge.
And now you mentioned systems and processes. Which internal systems at Aspire are you most proud of, and why do they work?
Yeah, that is interesting. So what I'm the most proud of is the way in which we do effectively critical path design and critical path implementation of solutions. And just to kind of expand on that a little bit, and it's got a slight history, and I won't take too long on it, but history is that I come from an engineering environment, so I didn't have a formal IT training. I was a civil engineer before I started Aspire Solutions. And when we got into this thing, and in the first 4 years, call it, of the life of the thing, as we moved towards becoming a custom solutions house, I actually, in a way, didn't have a formal training on rigid methodologies of doing things. And in a way, I think that was our DNA strand that became our biggest success, because what happened was that over time, I developed ways of doing things that suited us best, that created the quickest outcome for our clients and the most positive return for them. And initially, I was a little afraid to kind of publish these ideas or talk about the way that we were doing stuff, because I thought it was going against what industry does. So I thought we were doing it wrong, in inverted commas. And as we progressed and I saw the outcomes we were getting for clients, and 3-4 years later, I realized that, yes, there's conventional wisdom. Yes, there's the way things were done, but things evolve. And if you're not moving with those times and coming up with new ways of doing things, or maybe slightly better ways, you don't have to stick to the old ways. And at that time, I then realized that I'm going right away from trying to not talk about these things to pinning them on the wall and saying, in our DNA, that's what we do. And those processes include things like, if you really want to do critical path building of these systems, you find the balance between requirements and building. Because if you're spending 2-3 years talking to people about requirements and not building anything, you're never going to succeed in the modern era. And to that extent, we get really agile on these kind of things. And we have a terminology, just-in-time design, where we are literally doing design just ahead of the guys that are building software, which means we're also doing requirements gathering just in front of the guys that are doing design. So that within, if we start with a new client, within days, we're starting to build. So we're not just talking, we're building. And the beauty of that is, as you build, you're showing a client something, and they can see it, they can feel it, they see where you're trying to go, and they see what they actually want. Whereas if you're just talking to them, even they cannot visualize what they want within a context. And you can draw as many diagrams as you like, you can do whatever it is, you can do some mock-ups. But the point is that as soon as you get into something and you get something live and people are using it, that's when you really get the best information out of people. So, so those processes are entrenched in our organization. It's something that I'm trying to teach our guys and moving off just, it must be within the whole organization and the guys do it. It's challenging because you're jumping and trying to keep things in place. You also don't see the whole design when you start, and you have to make sure that you're not diverging or heading in the wrong direction. So you really try and make sure that you're doing just enough to kind of move forward and then converging to a real outcome. But I guarantee you, on a return basis, it's infinitely the best way to build software. The other challenge is that we have to operate in the framework of protecting the client's budget. Because if you say to me, I want to build this fairly nebulous thing, and I say to you, okay, I've got a great way of doing it, but we're going to do it in little bites. You're going to ask me how much it's going to cost. I'm going to say, I don't know, because I don't know what it is you want me to build. So we've either got to get into a bit of a trust relationship to a degree, so that you trust me that this is going to be a journey that's going to give you a good outcome. Or if you really want a fixed price, then I'm going to have to sit with you for 6 months and document what it is you want, get you to sign it. Then I'll say it's going to cost you X. And if you deviate off it by 1 yard, I'm going to say it's X plus whatever it is. So it's an ongoing challenge of contract management and making sure that the client's getting value for money. But at the same time, from an operations perspective, making sure that the solutions come out quickly and accurately as well. And that whole process is totally embedded in Aspire.
Yeah, that is super, super interesting. And have there been any recent strategic shifts that you've made that have had material improvements on delivery or client outcomes?
Yes, probably two. The first one is the obvious one, which is everybody, and that's AI again. We are not immune to AI in any shape, size, or form. What we are is on that. There is definitely going to be an expectation of speeding up from our clients. There's things that used to take a month. They're going to expect things are going to take quicker. I don't think it's come quite yet. I think over the next year, 2 years, that expectation is going to get stronger and stronger as this whole environment kind of evolves. So that's on the one hand. How do we apply AI within our production cycles to improve our rate of production? Okay, if I can put it that way. But on top of that is, how do we embrace AI as solutions for our clients? So there's a two-pronged thing for us. One is internally in terms of the tools we use. Another one is externally what we can offer our clients. So what we used to do 5 years, we can do in a better way this year. because of all these things, and watch the space because it's changing. So that's the one side. The second side is, and it almost speaks to the 22-year-oldness of the company, is that from a senior management perspective, we are trying to ensure that we're empowering our staff complement to be able to step up and take the same DNA that Aspire's had for 22 years and almost hand over the baton and say, okay, now you guys need to run with this. And that's really starting to bear fruit now. And it's a little bit of a difficult thing. We're not a big company. We're not a massive company. And in a way, you've got to hand over the baton. You've got to give trust to staff members. And you've got to learn to kind of let go, at the end of the day. But at the same time, without compromising the things that you, at the end of the day, feel are important. So that's the other strategic thing that's happened to us. And that's come in the last couple of years, maybe, or last year. But it's a realization that we're now getting to adulthood and beyond adulthood, and it's changing of a guard kind of stuff. So, yeah, those are the two strategic things that we've looked at that have changed.
And so you mentioned AI and automation. Are there any ways that these are quietly changing the way that Aspire operates behind the scenes?
Yes. And it's quite interesting. So obviously in a software development, software engineering arena as we do, we've got lots of software developers sitting out here. There was a lot of, first year, there has been a lot of noise, a lot of, fear mongering to a degree. People are going to be able to build software just by asking AI, I want a piece of software that does A, B, and C. And there is some of that happening, vibe coding or whatever you want to call it. And initially seeing our software engineers have a bit of a mixed approach. So firstly, some of them started embracing it a lot and started playing around with it. And I'm talking 6 months ago, a year ago. Some of them avoided it. Okay, and it was, I don't want anything to do with this, but it's coming from my job, and I'm just scared, and I don't want to do it. And what also happened, even us as, fairly old souls, that have been through the advent of the internet arriving and all sorts of good stuff, we also had to decide which way we were going to spin it. Am I going to ignore it, or am I going to look at it and play around with it and see what it is? And what happened, I think, for about 6 months is that everybody kind of did their own thing. So this guy tried it, this guy didn't try it. And from a senior perspective, we played around with it. And then I realized that we actually need to have a coherent and collective approach to using it internally. And we got everyone in the room and we said, guys, we need to look at what's good, bad, and ugly about this, because there's a lot of noise. A lot of people are saying things on the edges. From an engineer, a sophisticated systems perspective, there's no ways that these software engineers are going anywhere. They're going to evolve and they're going to improve their productivity. But what we're seeing coming out of this thing, now that we've got a coherent approach to it, is we're seeing what works and we're seeing what doesn't work. And we're educating and cautioning our clients, because at the end of the day, if somebody comes to you and says to you that they can build you a sophisticated system with just by voice, or just to give a AI agent a picture, it is going to be a disaster. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So we temper the expectations from our clients. We caution about quality, because at the end of the day, you might be able to do things 25% or 50% faster. But if I give you rubbish, and rubbish you don't always see rubbish from the outside. Okay, we're talking about the insides of these systems. That in a year's time, when you want to extend it, or is the internal sound, and therefore we're walking this journey with our clients. So you asked about the expectation. The expectation will be, okay, guys, you've got these nice tools now, so I want a 25% discount or 50% discount. But anyone who comes to you and says, I don't need you anymore, I'm sorry, you're going to get yourself into big trouble. But as a result, we're doing this with our clients and showing them some of the pitfalls of relying too much on it. And it's an interesting journey. It's the second time I've been through a similar thing, because in my old days as an engineer, when I started, the older engineers were still very much do things on a piece of paper, calculator, maybe a little bit on a spreadsheet kind of guys, and they were smart. I mean, they knew what was going on. They had total understanding of the feeling of the things that they were producing. So when something came out as an answer, they had a feeling, or they had a way to check that answer. And then what evolved out of that was they had these sophisticated software packages that came out that could do these analyses quicker, but they became black box. So you put these inputs in and you get these outputs out. And because you've been expected to do it so fast, you lose the ability to know whether the answer that's coming out is good or bad, and you just accept it. And I think this is the same thing. If we don't train up people, if we don't continue to invest in educating them as to what makes a good software engineer or a good business analyst or whatever it is, and they rely completely on the AI side of it, they're going to lose the ability to know good from bad or right from wrong. And we've seen wrong coming out of this thing. So for us, while it's on the one hand, it's embracing the technology that's available, we very much are still saying we need to continue to invest in the people, we need to evolve with the technology, and we need to make sure that at the end of the day, they are the custodians of what's right and wrong.
Yeah, super sound advice. I was having quite an interesting conversation with the owner of a dev house recently about vibe coding and how it's sort of it's on everyone's lips currently because it's very exciting. You can obviously, create things just by using a prompt, but he said there are some very serious limitations to scaling that end product for customers.
It's absolutely fine. If you're doing a nice little website or a nice small little web app that you want to do as a prototype, or as you say, that is not scaled, it's fine, absolutely fine. And it's a good way to get an idea across to your client as well, because I can whip it up in no time. I don't need a software engineer. It also gives you empathy for it and then a start of an understanding for it. But anything that's beyond that, in terms of a business system, it ain't gonna.
And where would you say your best clients are typically coming from today? And what's been one of the big challenges around keeping your client acquisition engine consistently churning out new leads?
Yeah. So as I said, we are a lot of public sector clients. We do quite a lot of work for the City of Cape Town. We do work for the Western Cape government. We also, and this is recently, we've done work for the airports company in South Africa. We've done work in collaboration with TomTom overseas. We've done other PTY limiteds. We've worked for British American Tobacco. But it tends to be large organizations, and whether it's a large public sector organization, and public sector is, there's different pockets. I mean, there's a public transport part of the Western Cape government, and there's a road infrastructure part, and there's a health thing. So that's not one amorphous client. It's multiple clients inside of the same client. And then on the large PTY limited, especially the older ones, as I said to you before, we see the same challenges and the same messes in those large PTY limiteds than is in government. So it's not that they're always better. There are some modern companies that started off on the right foot, and they were newer companies, and they've embraced technology from the get-go that are in a good space. But these older legacy companies, they've got the same challenges. So our biggest challenge is our lead, in terms of lead generation, is the very, very slow cycles. Okay, it's almost like it's year cycles, because at the end of the day, we need somebody to give us an opportunity to show them what we can do, and then they start to trust us. And if they trust us, then we continue having a relationship with them. And that's why it actually almost goes in these large cycles. So, and then at the end of the day, beyond that is actually getting a procurement within the government sphere. You've got to be properly appointed within the right manner and the right channels. There's often people that want us to do work for them, but they can't find a mechanism that is within the rules to actually appoint us. And sometimes those things fall on the wayside. So the need is there. The guys are crying for the need for these things. But those are sometimes some of the challenges. So we know that these things come and go a little bit, and a coffee today is another coffee tomorrow. And then, when you have a problem in January, you might get hold of us again. So we definitely not a company that turns a leader around in a week. It's these cycles are slow, and then once we're in, we foster and grow a long-term relationship with our clients. So typically work for them for 5 years or 6 years, and then build a partnership with them.
In terms of the, for example, working with public entities, if, for example, you are doing work with the Western Cape government's transport department, that doesn't necessarily give you an in with the healthcare department.
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely.
You need to rework the sales cycle, essentially.
And yeah, absolutely. And you need to be appointed in the right manner. So you can't work with the health department under public transport or roads infrastructure contract or whatever the case is. And yeah, it's totally different people, and they have totally different viewpoints. There's totally, even internally, politically, they have different viewpoints. Technologically, they have different viewpoints. Yeah, so each one of them you've got to approach in the right manner. There is always a bit of a central IT kind of hand on everything, but at the same time, each one is different, and you have to approach them completely differently.
And you alluded to the market's shift to sort of cloud and AI buzzwords, and everyone knows that they need to get involved somehow in AI. Have you found that that's changed the buyer expectation when you're sitting down with them, doing a discovery session, trying to understand what the pain points are and what they need?
Yes. As I said, the conversations are swirling around them. The cloud infrastructure has been around for a bit. We have a little bit of a strange thing where the city of Cape Town, for instance, is largely still internal. They are starting to embrace cloud infrastructure and cloud services. Whereas the Western Cape government has been a little bit further on the front foot as far as that's concerned. The interesting analogy that I use, so when cloud came out and started kind of getting itself, it was effectively the democratization of hardware. And you might know this, so before that, if you wanted to put out any application or software application, you'd have to go buy a server at a huge cost and have somewhere to put it. And when cloud came around, it was a game changer for people like us, because it meant that for a smaller client who didn't have this massive budget to go buy all this hardware, we could put a solution in the cloud quickly at a low cost. And as scaling was required, scaling happened and cost increased. So it was a total democratization of hardware. In a way, I look at AI and I see it as a total democratization of custom software. Okay, and the reason I say that is, and this is the thing again about people saying that you're not going to need software developers. What's actually going to happen is that, because there was a flavor of the month 5 years, 10 years ago about, I don't want anyone to build me custom software. I want to get something off the shelf. I want to use it off the shelf, and it's going to work for me. And I buy a license and I crack on. So sometimes that works. A lot of times that doesn't work, especially in the South African context. You get an American product, British product, whatever it is. You shove it in here, it doesn't match your processes properly. You try and shoehorn it in, you try and match your processes to it. You see you can't, then you get people in to try and customize it, and it just goes south. So what I see, and at that time people said, we don't want custom software because it's too expensive and we can get this thing for a license and it's much easier. I think what's happening, and I've seen it now in the last year, is that because of AI and because of the productivity gain, people are going to be able to do custom software cheaper. And that means more people are going to do custom software. In other words, I want this thing to work for me, not for generic us. If you guys want a piece of software within your organization and you want it to go left or right or brown, that's the way we're going to do it. And also means that people that couldn't afford custom software are now going to be able to afford it. So it's going to move down from the large organizations with big budgets, the big PTY limiteds, to the next tier of companies and the next tier and the next tier, right down to a mom and pop store who formerly could never afford this. And that's where vibe coding will come in. So at some level, somebody's going to go, there's a mom and pop store that does X and Y, or guy's selling something. He wants a system that does A and B for him, and it's quite simple and straightforward. He's going to find a vibe coder, and the vibe coder is going to knock him something up in a day or half a day or whatever the case is, and it's going to be fit for purpose for him. And that's what I find exciting about this. So as I say, the same way that cloud services democratize hardware, AI is democratizing custom software. And that actually means, our world is just going to get broader.
Yeah, that makes complete sense and a really logical explanation there. So do you think that this is a double-barreled question for you. Do you think South Africa there's developer scarcity? And what is
Absolutely.
Aspire's edge in attracting and growing talent?
Yeah, it is a real challenge. It is a real challenge. To answer your question, absolutely, there's a shortage of development talent. We are absolutely up against it because of international companies poaching / using our resources, because it's such a easy thing to do at a distance. We have companies coming in here from all over the world, signing up 50, 100 developers, software engineers, putting them somewhere and saying, okay, you go work for us now, and they're gone from the South African pool. So they're South Africans, they're sitting in South Africa, but they're gone from the South African pool. So it's a definite challenge. I think in terms of our approach to it is, and we have challenges, we battle with this. We try every avenue to try and attract talent. So we go the formal route of people coming through recruitment agencies, going through rounds of interviews with them, getting them in. But we don't, as a matter of fact, that it's not our favorite way of getting a resource. Sometimes we have to. What we prefer is it's a bit strange. Sometimes word of mouth, sometimes organically. We find somebody who's just finished university or just finished tech, and they come in as an intern or come in as a junior dev, junior engineer, and then we train them up. And it's the same thing with Academy. The Academy, we've even had scholars. We have scholars that have joined our Academy. We've given out a couple of bursaries for the Academy. And in a way, to answer your question, instead of finding the guys, we grow the guys. That's basically what happens. And it's not, we don't always get it right. And in the Academy that we've got, we mix it up. We use it for our junior staff in the office. They have to be part of the Academy to get them really productive really quickly. We use it for interns that come in and they are formally in the Academy. And then we open it up to scholars. And by scholars, I mean, we had a competition 6 months ago and 12 scholars arrived in the Academy with no cost to them and with no expectation. But in a way, it allows us to have a look at them and say, okay, those 2 kids or those 3 kids, they've got a real potential. And then the natural evolution is they'll go from that to an internship to a job. And because we do it it's a part-time basis. It's also a go at your own speed basis. So there's no prescription about you've got to get through modules in a certain pace. We can afford this to even school-going kids. We've had university students as well that have, while they're doing their formal degrees, are also been part of our Academy. So in short, to answer your question, we try and find diamonds in the rough, and then we grow them.
And how do you counter the allure of the US dollar or the British pound? Because that's assumedly why those international companies are coming looking for resources here, offering them, a salary that is much higher than if the individual was earning South African Rand equivalent, and probably at less in comparison to, a British counter or an American counterpart. How do you counter that? Yeah,
you counter it by one thing and one thing only, is that you've got to create the other parts of the triangle, because money is only one part of the triangle. In terms of overall kind of health and happiness, if you like, and meaning, the money is not just going to give you that. So if you don't believe in the solutions you're building, if you don't believe that the work that you're producing is meaningful and it's going somewhere and it's having an outcome, and you're part of a team that's trying to make it a part of an outcome, you can throw a lot of money at somebody and eventually they'll be unhappy and they'll leave. And I'm not saying all those international companies get it wrong. I'm just saying I have seen occasions where it is just about a bum on a seat and just about an output and an output and an output, and you don't really feel like you're part of a bigger thing. You don't even feel like you're part of that company because you're sitting a million miles away. There's no Friday afternoon, let's have a lunch or something like that. It can get quite isolated and lonely, I think. And that's what we've got here. We try very hard to make sure that, and it's not just about soft things like lunch and cake and stuff like that. It's about meaning and about believing in what you're building, and as a result, coming to work, not always with a smile on your face, but at least having a sense of purpose when you get it. And that sense of purpose, it's certainly what's kind of driven me in my working career. I think at the end of the day, that's worth a whole lot of dollars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just not to say you always get it right. And you also have guys coming in and say, I've been headhunted, or they're trying to headhunt me. And you've got to have that conversation and say, listen, well, maybe I can match it a little bit, but ultimately, and if a guy goes, he goes. That's the way it goes. You can't retain everybody. We've had a lot of people go overseas, and when a guy comes into your office and says, I'm off to Switzerland or Sweden or England, there's nothing you can do about it. You can try your best, but at the end of the day, he's on an adventure. He wants to go. Maybe he comes back, but he knows who you are. If he comes back, he'll knock on the door. Or if he knows a friend who's looking for something, he'll knock on the door. So, yeah, that's in short the only way we can actually try and counter that.
And what you mentioned about meaning and vision and purpose ties in with company culture, and company culture can often either make or break a company's ability to sustain itself and grow. Tell me a little bit about the culture within Aspire.
Yeah, so as I said, we're not a massive company, so we do have a bit of a family culture, although families also bicker and fight, and there's issues sometimes. So it's not all harmony and peace all the time. But I think because we're smallish, we don't have strict divisions of departmental divisions or large structures or hierarchies and stuff like that. And quite the opposite, we actually have an approach that we would like people to experience and learn outside of their core arena. So we want our software engineers to be involved with the business analysts. We want our business analysts to understand the coding a little bit. We want people to shift sideways. We want cover. We don't want divisions between projects. You're on that project and I'm on this project, and we never talk to each other. We actually have cover. We say, you're the primary on this project, but I want you to be secondary on it in case this guy's gone or sick or whatever the case is, and to learn from each other. So it's a very kind of fluid and kind of, I guess, family-like to a degree environment. We have a very strong approach to quick meetings. In other words, we don't have a lot of structured formal meetings. We do with our clients when we have to, but internally, if there's a design requirement, we grab 3 guys and rush into a room and whiteboard something out and then rush out again, kind of thing. And it happens quite organically as we kind of need it. And it's challenging because on the one hand it does lead to stress, because especially when you're trying to juggle a lot of things at the same time. But I think ultimately, certainly from our engineers side and everyone, it makes them feel part of the solution as well. They're not just there, that old analogy of you keep your software engineers in a dark room and push pizza under the door for them and give them their work list and you never talk to them, kind of thing. So we don't have that at all. And I think it works for us. It does come with its challenges. It sometimes comes with challenges where we've got a guy who wants a title. It's like are you a junior, senior, medium, or you want to be a vice president or what? But I think most of the guys get a lot out of it, and they learn a lot, and they grow, as their careers go on.
And as the leader, how do you keep your teams aligned on the why behind the decisions that you make, especially as you navigate the change?
Yeah, so actually I was talking to somebody about that today as well, is that we don't always get it 100% right. And even now, after 22 years, you learn that communication is the key. If I tell you what the purpose is, then you understand what the purpose is. If I'm hiding the purpose from you or not explaining it or something like that, you're not going to feel part of that take on it. So within the context of us being busy all the time and the day-to-day is actually within the weeks to stop and talk about the purpose and the meaning and the challenges and stuff like that, and explain that to staff and to make them part of that journey. And we don't do it right. As a matter of fact, as I say, we've actually had a thing now where we recognize that maybe we don't do it enough and we need to do it more. But there's also another part to that where I want to kind of empower the next level of leaders to do that as well to the staff, because we're not always accessible. We're busy. We're not always there. You can't talk to everybody all the time. You can't keep everyone but what you can do is empower a level of people to then do that for you. And even in a small organization, large organizations, it's layered management levels, but it's not necessarily very well done. It's organizationally done, but it's not necessarily very effective. And that's that we've got a couple of young-ish guys they've been around a bit, and we're trying to make sure that they, at the end of the day, can also take this vision forward and communicate properly to the staff and translate that vision down to them as well. And in order for them to be able to do it, give it to them. So I think communication is probably the.
And what would you say is working extremely well within Aspire right now?
I don't know, but we keep getting more work, and sometimes it's not what we want. No, I lie. I think our ability to deliver a working software that is absolute fit for purpose, work with the people in the organizations that we give it to get them to embrace and adopt it. So it's not just put the software down and walk away, because it doesn't work, and help them transition. People don't like change, and sometimes we get there and they've been doing something, and especially in government, they've been doing something the same way for 15 years. They've had this either a spreadsheet or an old system or something like that, and they don't even know why they're doing it like that anymore. That's the way it's always been done. And to get them to change is not easy. And I think we're very good at it. We're very good at understanding that software and custom systems is not about software. It's actually about people. And at the same time, process. And if those three things are not matched, then doesn't matter if those three things are out of sync, then you'll come. So you might get paid to build a piece of software, but it's never going to add value to your client. And I think from Aspire's perspective, we recognize that, and we're very good at knowing that those three things need to be done. Otherwise, you don't get a proper outcome.
And on the other side of my question, what's a consistent friction that's still slowing you down?
Yeah, let me think. I mean, there is the bureaucratic side, which I've mentioned, and that comes from our client side. Energy, I think, is probably another one. I know it sounds a bit strange, but you can't run at a high level 24/7, 365 days a year, which we got to do. And because of that, it's almost like our biggest challenge is the push-pull of growth. In other words, do we grow? And if we grow, because we're getting more work, because we're doing work successfully, we're getting more work. If we get more work, we can't handle it within the team. We need to grow the team. If we grow the team, will we lose that ethos? Will we lose that kind of way that we operate, which we don't want to do? And it's probably that push-pull that is the hardest thing for us to manage. And also, by the time you need more people, it's too late. So it's that constant flow of staff, and people do leave, as I say. It's not like we retain everyone. We had people here for a long time, but at the same time, people do leave, and then having to find new people. And that the question is, for the next 5 years, where are we going to be doing? What are we going to do about that?
It's an interesting balance to try and strike, because naturally you want to grow and scale, but as you say, you need the resources, and it's almost like a chicken and egg scenario. Which one comes first?
And you don't want to lose what made you successful, and that's the difficulty. And you've seen it. A lot of these like very big IT listed companies. I think of. I don't want to mention names, but some of them, they started off like us, and they just expanded and grew and grew and grew. They're incredibly successful, and they had a ethos that worked. And then at some point, they lost that, and they got so big that they got disconnected, and a lot of them took a hammering. So, and not that we would ever get to that size, but I think that the lesson is still the same. If you're going to grow, that's fine, but you've got to keep yourself in a manner where the things that made you successful are still relevant, even if you have to change it.
And Mike, if we cast our gaze into the future, let's say in the next 24 months, what are the top goals that you're chasing?
I think it's that empowerment of our staff. That's probably the biggest one. I mean, there are some client goals. In other words, we've got a few clients where we at the tipping point of getting their environments into a really good space, but those are specific client or project goals. But from organizational goals, it's empowering the staff so that from a senior management perspective, we can step back, be a little more strategic, look at things a little more from a broader perspective. and allow them to continue whilst holding the reins on quality, or the bar on quality and the way in which we do things. That would definitely be our next 24 months, 36 months.
If our viewers and listeners want to reach out, get hold of you, follow you, connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that, Mike?
Yeah, so obviously there's our website, so it's www.aspiresolutions.co.za. It also gives a sense of our products or our services, of which custom development is the biggest one. We've got another competency in data warehousing and a few other things. That's probably the best. We do have a LinkedIn profile. I don't know what the handle is offhand, and there is also an Instagram account. Again, I don't know what the handle is. But the other thing is we're in Newlands and Cape Town, so if anyone wants to pop in and have a cup of coffee and talk to us, often sometimes the old school way is also still a good way. Come and see. We've got a very nice little house that's converted to an office in Newlands, and the coffee is always on. So everyone's welcome to come and find us.
Amazing, Mike Boyer. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really good to get a better sense of the inner workings of Aspire, but also the broader aspirations of the company.
Yeah, Lawrence. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed the talk as well. And it's a really good initiative that you guys have got going, and I wish you luck with the future ones of these.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.